right now, as you are sitting in your car or at your desk or maybe just walking around your house listening to this, there's a very high probability that inside your torso, your internal organs are slowly collapsing under their own weight.
Yeah, it is wild to think about. We rarely ever think about gravity actually operating on our insides, you know?
Right. We
Yeah.
never think about it,
Mhm.
but day after day, year after year, your liver, your spleen, your intestines, they are all yielding to that downward pull. They are literally physically stacking on top of one another.
Exactly. And yet when we hit that classic 2:30 in the afternoon wall, when we feel completely drained, we never once think about our internal structural integrity.
No, we just treat our bodies like passive, empty jars. We think, well, I'm out of energy, therefore I must pour more fuel into the jar.
Oh,
So you reach for like another cup of coffee.
for a highly processed sugary snack, yeah.
Yeah.
Or you just try to white knuckle your way through the rest of the afternoon.
Yeah. And at best, we think about getting 8 hours of sleep. But by treating energy management purely as a matter of external inputs, I mean, we are completely ignoring the ancient built-in mechanical infrastructure of our own biology.
We really are. We are operating a high-performance machine as if it were just a simple bucket. If you look at the fundamental architecture of the human body, it is not designed to just passively hold the calories you consume.
Right. It is an active engine,
Exactly. It is a highly pressurized, dynamic, hydraulic, and pneumatic engine. It is designed to generate, store, and circulate its own power.
which is fascinating. So when you rely solely on external stimulants, you are essentially bypassing the engine completely. You are just throwing lighter fluid on the hood of the car, hoping it makes it go faster.
That is a perfect analogy. The true source of vitality isn't what you put into the system. It is how you operate the internal pumps, the seals, and the pressure valves that you literally already possess.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to completely rewire how you understand and interact with your own physical vitality. We are looking at a massive stack of incredibly profound source materials today.
Yes, these are classic foundational manuals. They detail the practices of Qigong, iron shirt, and bone marrow Nightcomb.
And what we're going to do is extract the most practical, powerful elements from these texts. We want to custom build a safe daily routine for you. A routine to master your own internal energy, lift those collapsing organs, and physically strengthen your body's hidden connective tissues.
But before we go any further, I think we really need to address the terminology here because when we encounter words like energy flow or meridians or ki, the modern mind often just categorizes that as purely esoteric.
Yeah, like something mystical or ungrounded.
Right. But the most compelling aspect of these ancient manuals is how fiercely mechanical they actually are. The practitioners who developed these systems were essentially the original biohackers.
They were observing anatomy way before modern imaging existed.
Exactly. We are not talking about visualizing some imaginary white light protecting you. We are talking about utilizing literal, verifiable physical pumps located right in your spinal column.
We are talking about the deliberate engagement of muscular diaphragms, right?
Yeah.
To act as airtight structural seals.
Yes. Manipulating the pressure of cerebrospinal fluid, stretching deep fascial layers, and creating measurable internal pounds per square inch. I mean, this is physics. It is hard anatomy.
So if you have ever felt disconnected from your own body, or if you feel like your energy levels are completely at the mercy of your caffeine intake, this deep dive is for you. We are going to chart a course through the day.
We will explore how you literally bring your body online in the morning, which is crucial.
Then we get into the central mechanism, right? The breath engine, and how to build and seal internal pressure. And finally, we will look at the vital evening protocols to safely decompress. So let's start right at the beginning of the day.
Yes, and actually before the day even really begins.
Right, because the timing of when you do this practice seems to be almost as important as the practice itself.
The timing is foundational. It requires a total shift in how we perceive the 24-hour cycle. To grasp why the morning is the critical window, we have to look at the Taoist clock.
And that is an ancient philosophical and biological framework, right? It maps how human physiology synchronizes with the natural world.
Precisely. In this framework, they track the interplay of yin and yang. Yang is the active, expansive, heat-generating force, and yin is the cooling, resting, receptive force.
Now, modern logic would definitely suggest that yang energy, like the peak of heat and activity, would be born right in the middle of the day, like at noon.
That would be the intuitive guess, yeah. Noon is when everything is brightest. But the texts suggest something entirely different. They state that yang energy is actually born in the dead of night, between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m.
Which feels like a paradox. How can the most active energy be born in the absolute darkest, quietest part of the night?
Well, consider the metaphor of a seed planted in the dead of winter. On the surface, there is just snow. It is dark, it is freezing, and it seems totally lifeless.
Right.
But deep underground, in the absolute darkest moment of the year, that seed cracks open. That initial microscopic spark of growth happens entirely in the dark. That explosive outward push that will eventually become a massive oak tree.
Oh, wow.
That is the birth of yang. It is the moment the resting phase bottoms out and the active phase quietly begins.
I love that visual. So conversely, yin energy, that cooling, winding down phase, that begins its initial growth from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m.
Exactly. Right when the sun is absolutely peaking, the underlying momentum is actually already shifting back toward rest. It is much like seeing the first yellow leaf appear in late summer.
I find that image so grounding for you to think about. The seed germinating under the winter snow. It means the energy isn't suddenly switched on. It has a long, slow gestation period.
Yeah.
So where does sunrise and sunset fit into this?
Sunrise and sunset are the twilight zones. They are the liminal spaces. During these brief windows, yin and yang are in perfect, momentary equilibrium.
So the environment is neither fully active nor fully at rest.
Right. And the ancient practitioners identified sunrise as the absolute optimal time to begin your daily practice because your internal biology is perfectly mirroring that external balance.
You're catching the wave of yang energy right as it breaks the surface of the day.
Exactly. But beyond just the philosophical alignment, there is a harsh, highly mechanical reason why morning practice is non-negotiable, and it has everything to do with the toxic byproducts of simply being asleep.
Yeah, we tend to view sleep as this passive state. You power down, the screen goes black, and you wake up recharged.
But the reality is that sleep is one of the most intense, biologically active periods of your entire cycle. While you are unconscious, your endocrine system goes into absolute overdrive.
The body is producing hormones to expedite cellular repair and metabolism.
Right. Yes. Your internal organs are working a grueling night shift. They are digesting, filtering, and metabolizing everything you consumed and experienced the day before.
And because none of us live in a perfect, pristine environment, that process isn't clean.
Not at all. We take in impure food, treated water, and polluted air, not to mention enormous amounts of sensory and emotional stress.
So the metabolic process of breaking all that down creates a massive amount of internal debris.
Overnight, your body essentially becomes a closed factory floor. By the time morning comes, that floor is covered in metabolic sawdust, cellular exhaust, and stagnant fluids.
Ugh, that sounds awful. But it makes so much sense. So if your alarm goes off and you simply jump out of bed, grab your phone, and rush into the day, what happens?
You are literally dragging all of that toxic stagnation right along with you. It sits in your joints, it weighs down your organs, and it completely clouds your nervous system.
So the morning practice is the specific mechanical sweeping of that factory floor.
Exactly. It flushes the overnight toxins out of the system before they can settle.
So if you are listening to this and you want to implement this tomorrow morning, the sources give us an incredibly precise, step-by-step runway to go from sleeping to standing. And it doesn't even start when your feet hit the floor.
No, it starts while you are still lying flat on your back. The very first action upon waking, before you even roll over, is to simply stretch your legs out, point your toes straight up toward the ceiling, and then lift your head off the pillow to look at your toes.
It sounds almost too basic to even mention. What is that actually doing mechanically?
It creates an immediate, gentle line of tension through the entire anterior chain of your body, from the back of the neck, down the spine, through the core, and right into the legs.
Oh, I see. So it neurologically signals the central nervous system that the deep yin state of rest is officially over.
Right. You are activating the fascial network and creating a mild core engagement without jarring the joints or spiking your cortisol levels.
And then you move to a seated position. You sit on the edge of the bed, planting both feet flat on the floor, and you sit in absolute stillness for exactly 1 minute.
Yes, 1 full minute.
I will tell you from personal experience, if you are used to the modern panic of waking up behind schedule, sitting still on the edge of your bed for 60 entire seconds feels agonizingly long. Your brain is just screaming at you to check your email.
Oh, absolutely. That mental friction is exactly why the minute is so necessary. But physiologically, it serves a crucial cardiovascular purpose too.
How so?
Well, when you lie horizontal for 8 hours, your blood pressure adapts to that plane. When you suddenly sit up, gravity immediately pulls the blood down away from your brain.
Oh, right. This is why so many people get that slight dizzy spell or orthostatic hypotension when they loop out of bed too fast.
Exactly. Sitting for 1 full minute gives your baroreceptors, which are the blood pressure sensors in your arteries, time to recalibrate to gravity. It allows the cardiovascular system to gently catch up, preventing that shocking head rush.
Once that minute has elapsed, you stand up. You take care of your basic bathroom hygiene, and then comes the hydration. You drink a single cup of warm water. And the texts are very explicit here, right?
Extremely explicit. Not tea, not coffee, not ice water, just warm, plain water. The temperature is the key.
Why is that?
Your internal organs have been generating heat all night. If you pour a glass of ice-cold water into that environment, it acts as a thermal shock to the digestive tract.
Like it freezes the engine.
Yes, the stomach muscles contract violently, and it essentially freezes the digestive fire. Conversely, immediate caffeine spikes the adrenal glands before the baseline energy has even been established.
So warm water perfectly matches the internal body temperature.
Exactly. It gently wakes up the gut motility, it hydrates the tissues, and flushes the gastrointestinal tract, acting like a warm rinse cycle for the stomach and intestines.
That makes perfect sense. So after the water, you step into whatever fresh air you have access to. A porch, an open window, a backyard, and this is where we get the very first physical exercise.
And it is beautifully uncomplicated.
It really is. 100 arm swings. You stand with your feet shoulder width apart, and you just rhythmically swing both arms forward and backward 100 times. The text notes this entire process takes less than 2 minutes.
It looks deceptive because of how simple it is, but the mechanical function is profound.
Hmm.
Unlike your cardiovascular system, which has a massive dedicated pump, the heart, your lymphatic system, does not have a central pump.
And the lymphatic system is responsible for carrying away cellular waste and toxins, right?
Yes. And it relies entirely on physical movement and muscular contraction to circulate. So those 100 rhythmic arm swings serve as a gentle, continuous manual pump.
They create a pendulum effect.
Right. That begins to move the lymph fluid and the venous blood up from the extremities, through the axillary nodes in your armpits, and back toward the core. It also gently lubricates the shoulder joints.
You know what this reminds me of? It's like trying to start my dad's old classic truck on a freezing morning.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Yeah, you don't just shove the key into the ignition, instantly throw it into drive, and floor the gas pedal onto the highway. If you do that, you will literally tear the engine apart because the oil is cold and viscous, pooling at the bottom of the oil pan.
Exactly. The pistons would just be scraping against dry metal.
Right. You have to turn the engine over and just let it idle in the driveway for a few minutes. You have to wait for the heat to build naturally for the oil pump to push lubrication up through the entire engine block.
That is exactly what those 100 arm swings and that cup of warm water are doing for your blood and chi. You are letting your biological engine idle, warming the fluids, and coating the joints before you put the vehicle in gear.
It is the perfect mechanical equivalent.
Huh.
And once the engine is idling smoothly, the routine moves into a posture called Wuji.
Yes. You let your arms settle at your sides, and you stand completely still. But it is important to note, it is not a dead, passive stillness.
It's an active observation, right?
Exactly. You perform a systematic top-down internal body scan. You place your mental focus at the top of your head, and you slowly pull that awareness down behind your eyes, through your jaw, down the muscles of the neck.
Down across the shoulders and through the chest and hips.
Right. You are consciously seeking out and releasing any microscopic pockets of muscular tension that form during the night.
And then, from that deeply relaxed, grounded Wuji state, you transition into the final phase of the warm-up, the golden ball posture.
Yes, you slowly float your hands up, bringing them to rest in the empty space just in front of your belly. You shape your arms and hands as if you are gently cradling a large, glowing, golden sphere.
You drop your shoulders, open your armpits slightly, and just hold the structural frame for 1 minute.
And while maintaining that rounded frame, you introduce a very subtle dynamic tension. You slowly twist your wrists, tense the muscles of the hands and fingers as if squeezing a sponge, and then completely relax them.
And you repeat this tensing and relaxing 12 times.
Yes. In traditional Chinese medicine, many of the primary energy meridians, which are the pathways that conduct qi throughout the body, originate or terminate in the tips of the fingers and the wrists.
So by cyclically tensing and relaxing the hands, you're essentially priming the pumps at the very ends of the circuit.
Exactly. You are stimulating a profound energetic connection between the farthest reaches of your extremities and the deep core of your body. Finally, you take a deep breath, lower your arms, and simply stand for a moment to gather your energy.
Which completely closes the preparatory runway. Okay, the factory floor is swept, the oil is circulating, the engine is warm, and the vehicle is idling perfectly.
But an engine idling in the driveway isn't actually going anywhere.
Right. We need to actually generate horsepower. We need to create the internal pressure and vitality that is going to carry you through that 2:30 p.m. slump. Which brings us to the core mechanism of the entire system, the breath engine.
And what the ancient texts reveal here is somewhat confronting, honestly, because it turns out the way the vast majority of us unconsciously breathe all day long is incredibly flawed.
It's worse than flawed. The texts say it is a net negative energy transaction. They meticulously document that the average untrained adult utilizes barely 1/3 of their actual lung capacity.
It is shocking. Most modern people are locked into shallow apical breathing, meaning they only breathe into the very top portion of the chest.
And when you breathe this way, the intercostal muscles between your ribs have to physically contract and heave the entire heavy, bony structure of the rib cage upward and outward against gravity.
Just to draw a meager sip of air into the upper lobes of the lungs, the physical, caloric, and energetic cost of heaving your skeleton around 13,000 times a day is massive.
You are literally burning more vital energy to take the breath than the shallow oxygen exchange is giving back to your body.
It is an engine that is slowly destroying its own fuel supply just to keep running.
A terrible return on investment. So to fix this broken mechanism, the source material introduces two highly specific, contrasting methods of breathing. The first is called abdominal breathing.
Frequently referred to in the text as Buddhist breathing or the yin method.
How does this physically alter the mechanics inside the human torso?
The central actor in this entire process is the thoracic diaphragm. Imagine a large, thick, dome-shaped sheet of muscle that horizontally bisects your torso, sitting right at the base of your ribs.
Separating your heart and lungs from your digestive organs below, right?
Exactly. In shallow chest breathing, this massive muscle is practically paralyzed. It barely twitches. But in abdominal breathing, the entire focus shifts.
So as you inhale through your nose, you consciously command that dome-shaped diaphragm to contract and flatten downward.
Yes. And because it sits right above the organs, pushing it down causes a massive displacement.
Enormous displacement. It acts like a hydraulic press.
Right. It physically bears down on the vital organs sitting beneath it. It applies a firm massaging pressure specifically to the adrenal glands, which sit like little hats on top of your kidneys and the kidneys themselves.
I want to visualize this clearly for you listening. By forcing the internal organs downward, the diaphragm is creating a literal physical void in the chest cavity above it.
Exactly. It creates a powerful negative pressure vacuum. Because the diaphragm has dropped out of the way, the lower lobes of your lungs, which are anatomically the largest and most dense with blood vessels, are finally free to inflate completely.
They pull air deep into the base of the lungs without you having to heave your rib cage at all.
And now, because all those dense, fluid-filled internal organs have to go somewhere when they're pressed downward, they push outward against the only flexible wall available.
The front of your stomach.
Yes. Therefore, your abdomen naturally protrudes outward on the inhale, inflating like a balloon.
And something interesting happens to the upper chest during this too. The text notes that as the belly expands, the chest and the sternum actually hollow out or sink inward slightly.
Right. It says this mild compression actively presses on the thymus gland, which sits right behind the sternum, stimulating the immune system.
Then, when you exhale, the diaphragm releases its tension, floats back up into its dome shape, the lungs empty, and the abdomen naturally flattens back toward the spine.
It is a supremely efficient, fluid motion. But the true power of the yin method lies in the biochemical reaction it creates.
Yes, I really want to highlight a specific, truly fascinating claim from the source text regarding this. The manuals state that because this deep, lower lobe breathing facilitates such an incredibly rich and efficient exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood, it radically elevates the baseline metabolic rate.
It is incredible. The text asserts that this oxygen-rich metabolic fire becomes so hot, so biochemically robust, that it physically helps to convert stored abdominal fat into usable T.
Let that sink in. By mechanically altering how the diaphragm drops, You are literally incinerating adipose tissue and converting it into a larger overall quantity of bioelectric energy.
While the ancient practitioners didn't use the modern terminology of lipid oxidation or mitochondrial ATP production, their observational science was flawless.
Deep, sustained oxygenation fuels the metabolic fires necessary to break down dense energy stores like fat.
Exactly. They called this abdominal breathing the yin method because the neurological result is deeply calming. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It centers the mind, slows the heart rate, and is designed specifically for generating and storing massive amounts of energy in the lower belly.
The Taoists referred to this abdominal region as the lower dantian, right?
Yep.
It is the body's primary biobattery.
Yes. You use the yin method to charge the battery.
Okay, so that is the gathering, cooling, charging phase. But then the texts pivot. They introduce the yang method, which is known as reverse breathing or Taoist breathing.
And if the yin method is about calming and storing, the yang method seems to be about weaponizing the breath.
Weaponizing is an apt term. The mechanics of reverse breathing are fundamentally opposed to what we just discussed.
Right. When you begin the inhale, you still focus on pushing the thoracic diaphragm downward to fill the lower lungs. However, instead of allowing the abdomen to relax and bulge outward to accommodate the displaced organs, you do the exact opposite.
As you draw the air in, you actively, forcefully contract the abdominal wall, pulling your stomach inward toward your spine.
Yes.
Wait, I have to stop right here.
Yeah.
Because if you try to do this right now, inhaling deeply while simultaneously sucking your stomach in as hard as you can, it feels completely unnatural.
Oh, it does. It feels incredibly tense, claustrophobic, and honestly, a bit panicky.
Right. If the whole point of breathing is to get oxygen into a relaxed body, why on earth would we intentionally create a massive muscular collision in the gut?
Your reaction is exactly why it feels claustrophobic. You are artificially creating an extreme pressure environment inside a closed biological container. And that is exactly what makes it a yang practice. It is inherently aggressive.
But I mean, why do it?
To demystify it, consider that you already perform reverse breathing unconsciously in moments of extreme physical demand.
Oh, really? Like when?
Imagine you are walking down the street and a car is stuck in the snow. You step behind the bumper to help push it out. In that microsecond, before you exert maximum force against the bumper, what does your body do?
I guess I wouldn't take a relaxed belly breath and let my stomach hang out.
Exactly. You instinctively take a sharp breath in, hold it, and violently brace your abdominal wall inward. You lock your core to stabilize your spine.
Oh, wow. Yeah, creating a rigid structural pillar so you can transfer kinetic energy from your legs through your torso and into the car. That makes total sense. We also do it when we get into a fight or when we are intensely startled, right? It's the biological bracing mechanism.
Precisely. It is the body's natural pneumatic pressurization system. By consciously harnessing this reverse breathing in a controlled environment, you are essentially hijacking that primal pressure system.
So when the diaphragm pushes down but the abdominal wall pushes back, the internal pressure skyrockets.
This immense pressure physically squeezes the oxygenated blood and the qi, forcing it outward. It drives the energy to the surface of the skin, empowering the fascial web.
And even more profoundly, the texts state that this pressure drives the energy deep into the core of your bones.
Yes, they call this enhancing the sui qi, or the marrow energy, which is responsible for deep immune resilience and blood production.
But because it is so aggressive, the text includes a blaring neon warning sign.
A critical warning. The ancient masters insisted that a practitioner must completely and flawlessly master the relaxed yin abdominal breathing before they even attempt a single cycle of reverse breathing.
Because if your internal organs are stiff, if your diaphragm is locked, and you try to compress them with reverse breathing, you will not generate energy.
No, you will cause severe abdominal cramping, trap stagnant heat in the chest, and potentially damage the delicate tissues of the organs. You have to make the balloon flexible before you try to overinflate it.
Let's address the biggest roadblock for anyone trying to build this engine. The entire system, both yin and yang, hinges on the ability to lower that dome-shaped diaphragm.
Right. But because we've spent decades chest breathing, that muscle is often chronically tight, atrophied, and essentially glued to the rib cage.
So when a beginner tries to push it down, it often rebels. It tightens up and actually pushes upward into the chest, causing a feeling of breathlessness. What is the practical intervention when the machinery gets stuck?
The texts offer a beautifully direct physical solution. You don't just sit there and meditate harder. You use your hands.
Literally use your hands to fix it.
Yes. If you feel your diaphragm locking up and pushing into your chest on the inhale, you take the fingers of both hands and you physically trace the base of your rib cage. You apply a firm massaging pressure directly to the muscular attachments of the diaphragm.
And then you move your hands down to your belly, and you gently but firmly knead the tissue around the navel.
Right. By applying direct manual friction, you are breaking up the physical adhesions in the fascia, increasing local blood flow, and sending a highly specific neurological signal to the muscle spindles.
Giving them permission to unclench and drop out of the thoracic cavity, it is literal manual maintenance on your internal engine.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's take stock.
Yeah.
We have learned how to sweep the factory floor. We've established the yin breath to gather huge amounts of energy and the yang breath to pressurize it. We have a roaring fire in the furnace.
But here is the critical failure point that most people completely overlook.
Generating all of this power is completely useless if your biological container has structural leaks.
Exactly. It is time to look at the floor of the body. This is a fundamental pillar of Neikung and the Iron Shirt disciplines.
We tend to visualize the human torso as one big empty cavern where the stomach, liver, and lungs just sort of float around together.
But the reality is that the torso is highly compartmentalized. It is segmented by several horizontal layers of muscle and connective tissue, diaphragms, that act as shelves and seals.
We just spent a lot of time discussing the thoracic diaphragm, which forms the ceiling of the abdominal cavity. But the energy and internal pressure we are building doesn't just push up.
No, gravity pulls it down. Therefore, we must secure the lower seals.
To understand these seals, we need to map the anatomy of the absolute bottom of the torso. What exactly is keeping our organs from falling out?
At the very base of your pelvic bowl, you have the pelvic diaphragm. Think of this structure as a thick, muscular hammock. It anchors to the pubic bone in the front, stretches across the base of the pelvis, and attaches to the sacrum and tailbone in the back.
And this muscular sling is tasked with an incredible amount of heavy lifting. It physically supports the weight of the large and small intestines, the bladder, the kidneys, the liver, the spleen.
The entirety of your lower viscera rests on this hammock.
And it isn't the only layer down there, is it?
No. Just beneath the pelvic diaphragm, sitting right at the surface level above the perineum, is a secondary muscular sail called the urogenital diaphragm. These two layers work in tandem to form the literal floor of your core.
Here is the problem. Unless a physical therapist or a doctor has explicitly prescribed exercises for the pelvic floor, the average person goes their entire life without ever consciously contracting or exercising these lower muscles.
They are completely ignored.
So what happens to the internal structure when those specific lower diaphragms weaken and atrophy over time?
When the floor weakens, it yields. Gravity is relentless. As the pelvic hammock sags, the internal organs begin to descend from their optimal anatomical positions. They physically drop and stack up on top of one another down in the lower pelvic bowl.
This visceral stacking is actually one of the primary hidden causes of a protruding lower abdomen, completely independent of how much subcutaneous body fat a person has.
Yes. But more critically for our practice, when these organs drop and those muscular seals lose their integrity, the physical bottom of your energetic container becomes porous.
So the immense vital energy, the qi, that you are painstakingly generating with your deep breath engine literally leaks out through the lower openings of the body and dissipates into the ground.
It is exactly like trying to keep coffee hot in a high-end thermos. You can pour boiling water in. You can have the best vacuum-insulated walls on the market.
But if the bottom cap of the thermos is even slightly unscrewed, all of that liquid and all of that heat is just going to seep out onto the counter.
Precisely. You can stoke the breath engine all day long, but if you don't tighten the bottom cap first, you are wasting your time.
That is the exact mechanical reality. To tighten that bottom cap, the ancient practitioners developed an internal mechanism known as qi weightlifting.
And this does not involve external iron. It involves highly coordinated internal muscular contractions designed to generate a powerful upward counterforce against gravity and internal breath pressure.
The technique requires you to consciously, actively pull up the sexual organs. Simultaneously, you firmly contract the sphincter muscle of the anus and you draw up the perineum.
The perineum being that specific soft depression located exactly midway between the genitals and the anus, known in Chinese medicine as the Hui Yin point, the meeting place of yin.
Now, if someone listening is trying to physically pull up the perineum and clench those muscles right now, their immediate reflexive instinct is going to be brute force. They're going to squeeze as hard as they possibly can, making their whole face turn red.
And that brute force approach is the fastest way to sabotage the entire system. When you use pure, aggressive, muscular force, you create rigid, static tension, you lock the tissue.
Rigid tension physically strangles the local blood vessels and completely blocks the subtle flow of energy.
The goal is to create a dynamic, elastic seal, not a concrete wall. To achieve this, the physical contraction must be married to absolute mental focus. You cannot muscle your way through it. You must use the mind to guide the structural integrity.
How is that achieved? I mean, how do you clench a muscle without creating tension?
The texts introduce a psychological tool here called the inner smile.
The inner smile. It sounds a bit abstract, doesn't it?
It does, but it is arguably one of the most brilliant and subtle technologies in the Taoist internal arts. It is designed to create a physiological paradox.
How so?
While you are physically engaging and contracting the muscles of the pelvic floor, you direct your mental focus inward. You vividly imagine the physical sensation of smiling directly down into your own internal organs.
You project a profound feeling of warmth, gratitude, safety, and deep relaxation down into your belly.
It sounds a bit abstract, but the biological result is very real. By maintaining that inner state of smiling relaxation, you continuously signal the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system that the body is safe.
Oh, so it prevents the brain from interpreting the muscular contraction as a stress or panic response.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You are successfully maintaining a watertight structural lock at the base of the pelvis, while the organs inside the abdomen remain neurologically soft, relaxed, and receptive to the energy being generated. It is tension without stress.
Let's look at the incredible mechanism we have built so far. We have the diaphragm pumping like a piston, generating massive internal heat and pressure. We have the pelvic floor tightly sealed and smiling, ensuring that the pressure doesn't leak out the bottom.
But this energy can't just sit stagnant in the pelvic bowl.
Right, it has to be distributed to fuel the nervous system and the brain. How does this contained power actually circulate? This introduces the hidden internal hydraulics of the body.
To comprehend how this energy travels upward against gravity, we have to shift our focus to a remarkable physiological fluid, the cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF.
This is the clear, highly specialized fluid that physically bathes, cushions, and nourishes your brain and the entirety of your spinal cord. It is the liquid medium of the central nervous system.
And the crucial detail the texts point out is that this fluid does not just lazily drift around on its own. It requires a mechanical push.
The fluid must be continuously rhythmically pumped up and down the spine to maintain optimal brain function, to keep the nerve roots healthy, and to distribute the energetic patterns we are generating throughout the whole body.
The ancient Taoists mapped this fluid dynamic thousands of years before modern spinal taps or MRIs. They observed that the human body possesses two primary structural bone pumps specifically designed to circulate this fluid.
The first pump is located at the very foundation of the spine, the sacral pump.
Right. For anyone listening who might be rusty on their skeletal anatomy, if you reach your hand around to the base of your lower back, right above the cleft of your buttocks and above the tailbone, you will feel a large, flat, somewhat triangular-shaped bone.
That is the sacrum. Interestingly, when we are born, the sacrum is not a single bone. It is actually 5 separate, distinct vertebrae.
Yes. As we grow and begin to walk upright, the mechanical stress of gravity causes those 5 bones to fuse together into one solid wedge. The internal arts view this fused wedge as the grand central station of the body's lower energy network.
The sacrum collects the highly refined, potent energy, the original essence, that pools in the lower pelvic bowl, and it serves as the physical launch pad to thrust that energy upward into the spinal column.
So how do we manually operate this launch pad? How do you turn the sacrum into a pump?
It requires a highly specific sequence of muscular triggers, building directly on the lower seals we just established.
Yes. From a standing position, you subtly tuck your pelvis, physically tilting the bottom of the sacrum backward and slightly under. As you hold that tilt, you firmly clench the gluteal muscles, the buttocks, and you aggressively engage the contraction of the perineum and the anus.
What is that combination of movements actually doing inside the pelvis?
By locking the muscles around the tilted bone, you are physically creating a powerful vacuum effect within the urogenital diaphragm. This mechanical vacuum literally acts like a suction hose.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it reaches down and draws the deeply refined energy, what the texts refer to as Qing Qi, upward.
Let's pause on that term, Qing Qi, because it is vital to understand. The texts translate this as refined sexual energy. In modern, westernized fitness or wellness, we almost entirely ignore the energetic potential of the reproductive system outside of basic procreation.
But these classical sources view it completely differently. They view it as the most dense, potent, and creative biological fuel the human body possesses.
Qi is the raw, generative essence that creates life. If that energy is not utilized for reproduction, the Taoists recognize that it shouldn't just be ignored or allowed to stagnate.
Through the mechanical action of the sacral pump, that dense, heavy Qi is physically suctioned out of the lower centers, refined, and injected directly into the cerebrospinal fluid inside the spinal column.
The sacral pump fires, and the pressurized fluid begins its journey straight up the inside of the spine.
And it is rushing upward toward the opposite end of the spine where it meets the second crucial mechanism, the cranial pump.
Yes. And this requires overturning a very common misconception about the human skull. We tend to think of the cranium as a solid, immovable, fused bowling ball of bone, like a rigid helmet protecting the brain.
But the skull is actually composed of 8 distinct cranial bones, joined together by jagged, puzzle-like seams called sutures. Medical osteopathy now aligns perfectly with ancient Taoist observation.
These cranial bones are not entirely fused dead matter. There is a minute, microscopic degree of flexibility at those sutures. As you breathe, these bones expand and contract in a microscopic rhythm.
The skull physically breathes to pump the cerebrospinal fluid through the brain.
This is where the text brings up a fascinating diagnostic point. It observes that a huge percentage of people suffer from a jammed cranial pump due to early physical trauma that locked those micro-movements.
It could be trauma from birth, being jammed in the birth canal, or the use of forceps. Or it could be from a severe whiplash in a car accident later in life. The tiny joints get stuck.
The skull loses its subtle flexibility and the fluid stops circulating effectively. The result is chronic, unexplained headaches, sinus pressure, visual disturbances, or a constant feeling of mental fog.
Because the irrigation system of the brain is essentially stagnant, to unjam this system and manually activate the cranial pump, the texts detail a very precise alignment of the head and neck.
First, you take the flat upper surface of your tongue and press it firmly against the roof of your mouth, with the very tip resting just behind your upper front teeth.
That seems like a strange detail. Why the tongue?
The tongue is the physical switch that connects the primary energy channels. By touching it to the palate, you are literally closing the circuit between the ascending channel up the back and the descending channel down the front.
Once the circuit is closed, you subtly clench your teeth together. Then, you actively pull your chin straight back, tucking it inward toward your throat.
This action physically straightens out the cervical vertebrae, the bones in the back of your neck, locking the base of the skull into a rigid alignment. Finally, you roll your eyes upward, looking internally toward the crown of your head.
Let's be completely honest here. If someone is standing in their living room trying to follow this, they are tilting their sacrum, clenching their perineum and their glutes, sticking their tongue to the roof of their mouth, clenching their jaw, tucking their chin into a double chin position, and rolling their eyes into the back of their head. I have to ask, how does a person know if this is actually working? Because objectively, it sounds like you were just making a bizarre face and squeezing random muscles.
It is a profoundly fair question. It feels incredibly strange at first, but the texts are absolutely unambiguous about the physical feedback loop.
When you successfully align the lower seals, the breath pressure, the sacral tilt, and the cranial lock, you will not have to guess if it is working. Practitioners consistently report a highly specific, undeniable sensation.
As the fluid pressurizes, you will literally feel what is described as a big bubble of dense energy, physically pushing its way up the interior channel of your spine.
A bubble. That is such a visceral, mechanical description.
It is entirely tactile, and if you don't feel the distinct bubble, the secondary confirmation happens the moment you release the tension. When you finally exhale, drop your arms, and relax the locks, the pressurized Qi floods out of the spinal column and into the peripheral nervous system.
You will experience a profound, radiant rush of heat flooding across the surface of your skin, or a deep, distinct, glowing warmth suddenly expanding outward from your navel.
If you feel the bubble, or if you feel that intense flush of heat upon release, you have successfully operated the internal hydraulics. The fluid is moving.
This is truly incredible. We have essentially engineered a biological pressure cooker, and that brings us to the absolute climax of this physical routine, the core of the iron shirt practice, internal armor.
We have generated the energy with the breath. We have sealed the bottom so it doesn't leak. We have pumped it up the spine. Now, how do we weaponize this pressurized energy to physically fortify our internal organs and restructure our connective tissue.
This represents the pinnacle of the daily mechanics. It is known as the packing process. We are going to take every single component we have isolated so far and detonate them simultaneously in one explosive internal mechanism.
Walk us through the exact sequence of the packing process.
You begin by establishing an impenetrable base. You actively pull up the genitalia, lock the perineum, and tighten the anus. Your pelvic floor is now a solid wall.
Second, you deploy the yin abdominal breath. You force the thoracic diaphragm downward as far as it will go, pressing the internal organs into the lower belly.
Third, you instantly switch to the yang reverse breath. You forcefully contract the front abdominal wall inward, pulling your stomach flat toward your spine.
So the organs are trapped, the diaphragm is crushing them from above, the pelvic floor is locked below, and the stomach wall is smashing them from the front. The container is sealed and highly pressurized.
Precisely. And this is where the breathing technique changes radically. You do not attempt to take a huge, deep breath. The container is already full of pressurized tissue.
Instead, while holding that intense structural lock, you take in just 10% of your total lung capacity through your nose. It is a short, sharp, violent sip of air.
You pull that tiny volume of air down, and using your muscular focus, you mentally pack it directly into the compressed organs.
Because the top of the system is sealed by the locked neck and chin, and the bottom is locked by the pelvic floor, that tiny sip of air has nowhere to go.
It can't escape, so it has to expand. The text describes the physical result of this. Your torso expands outward, but crucially, it doesn't just push out in the front like a beer belly.
The expansion happens symmetrically in all directions. The front of your stomach, the sides of your waist, and the lower back all expand proportionally until your entire lower torso is completely round, solid, and pressurized like a bowling ball.
And this is where we uncover the true genius of the Iron Shirt methodology, the manipulation of the fascia.
Fascia is the incredibly tough, fibrous, web-like connective tissue that shrink wraps every individual muscle, every bone, every blood vessel, and every organ in your body.
When you force air into this sealed container, you are generating an extraordinarily high PSI, pounds per square inch, inside the abdominal cavity.
What does that high PSI actually do to the internal architecture?
It performs two miraculous functions. First, it completely reverses the organ collapse we talked about at the beginning of the show.
That massive internal air pressure physically lifts the liver, the spleen, the intestines, and the kidneys up off the pelvic floor. It wedges them tightly back into their proper optimal anatomical positions.
It completely eliminates the stacking effect. With the organs suspended in this high-pressure bubble, the blood vessels unkink, and vital energy can finally flow through them without obstruction.
That is the first function. What is the second?
Second, this immense internal balloon pushes violently outward against the layers of fascia. Under normal circumstances, fascia can become dry, brittle, and glued together.
By expanding the abdomen under high PSI, you are stretching, energizing, and physically tearing those fascial adhesions from the inside out.
You are taking the spider web and pulling it taut, making it thick, resilient, and elastic. You are literally building internal armor using compressed air.
I want to use an analogy here to make this crystal clear. Think about the tires on a heavy car. The rubber wall of a tire is very thick, but on its own, it has absolutely no structural integrity.
Right. Without air pressure inside, the heavy rubber simply folds and collapses under the sheer weight of the vehicle. The tire goes completely flat, and the car's rim grinds against the pavement.
Exactly. The rubber alone cannot support a 2-ton machine. But when you attach an air compressor and pump that tire full of high-pressure air, that invisible air pushes forcefully outward against the inner walls of the rubber.
Suddenly, that exact same tire becomes indestructible. It can support thousands of pounds, it can corner at high speeds, and it can bounce over massive potholes without denting the rim.
The human torso is identical. Without internal chi pressure, our heavy organs just collapse under gravity, stacking and flattening against our pelvis. But when we pack them with high PSI breath pressure, the internal structure becomes incredibly resilient and capable of absorbing massive external shock.
That is a flawless mechanical description of Iron Shirt. The true healing benefit occurs in the moment immediately following the tension. You hold this intense, packed pressure for a few seconds. You condense the energy tightly into the organs.
And then you forcefully exhale through the mouth and completely relax your entire body. When you release that high-pressure lock, the blood vessels that were squeezed tight suddenly spring open.
Fresh, highly oxygenated blood and pure qi violently rush back into the organs and the fascia. It acts exactly like a high-powered internal pressure washer.
It scours the tissues, flushes out deeply embedded cellular debris, and leaves the organs drastically stronger, healthier, and hypervitalized.
But the soft tissue and the organs cannot withstand this kind of extreme pressure operating in a vacuum. The skeletal structure has to provide a rigid scaffolding to absorb and ground the force.
How do the bones integrate into this packing process?
The skeletal alignment is the grounding wire for the entire explosive system. If your bones are out of alignment, the pressure will simply blow out the weakest joint. The texts isolate two incredibly critical vertebrae in the spine that handle this load.
The first is C7. This is the large bony protrusion at the very base of your neck, the bone that sticks out the furthest when you drop your chin to your chest.
Why is C7 so important?
In the internal martial arts, C7 is viewed as the grand junction point. It is the major intersection where the tendons of the arms and the upper body meet and anchor to the spinal cord.
When you lock your chin during the cranial pump we discussed earlier, you are physically locking C7 into place.
You are creating a solid, bony bridge that directs the massive hydraulic force shooting up from the sacrum directly into the structural mass of the upper body, preventing the delicate neck from snapping back.
And the second key bone.
The second is the T11 vertebra, located right in the lower thoracic spine near the bottom of the rib cage. The texts detail postures like embracing the tree.
Oh, right. Where you stand with your knees bent, sacrum tucked, and arms circled in front of your chest while you perform the packing process.
Yes. In this specific alignment, T11 acts as the structural fulcrum. If an external force, say a heavy physical blow, pushes against your chest, or if the internal breath pressure becomes extreme, the alignment of T11 catches that kinetic energy.
It instantly transfers the force down the curve of your lower spine, straight down the bones of your legs, and safely into the ground. Your skeleton becomes an unbreakable lightning rod for mechanical force.
And some practitioners actually use slant boards, right?
Yeah, exactly. Slant boards are incredibly useful here. When you stand on a slant board with your toes elevated, it physically forces a deep stretch in the calf muscles and the Achilles tendons, which are part of that posterior fascial chain.
It also artificially induces a slight posterior pelvic tilt.
Right, which naturally drops the sacrum into that tucked position we need for the sacral pump, making it way easier for beginners to feel that lower spine alignment before they try to hold it under pressure.
Okay. Even just talking through the mechanics of the packing process makes my heart rate elevate. It is an incredibly intense, aggressive procedure. It is undeniably powerful, but it also clearly demands deep respect and caution. We cannot just leave you fully pressurized.
No, absolutely not. We need to safely bring the system back down, which brings us to the vital safety protocols and the evening wind down.
Caution is the operative word. You are manipulating intense biological and neurological levers. The texts, quote, the legendary Han Dynasty physician Hua Tuo, who laid down a foundational rule for all internal practice.
The body must have exercise, but it should never be done to the point of exhaustion.
This is not a Western boot camp. It is not a no pain, no gain scenario where you push until you vomit. Pushing this practice to the point of structural failure will severely damage your internal organs.
What are the specific physical warning signs that a practitioner is pushing too hard and needs to abort the practice immediately?
The most immediate and critical red flag is chest pain. When you are packing the air into the abdomen, you must never use brute force to the point where your chest feels tight, congested, or painful.
If you feel a sharp pinch, a heavy crushing sensation, or a burning pain anywhere near your heart or sternum, you must immediately drop your arms, release the posture entirely, open your mouth, and return to very soft, relaxed yin abdominal breathing.
Chest pain means you are pushing the PSI too high, too fast, and the pressure is backing up into the cardiovascular system.
The text also mentions a highly specific, almost bizarre symptom that can occur during intense practice: sudden, copious salivation.
It describes a phenomenon where the mouth suddenly floods with sweet-tasting saliva. What is the protocol if that happens?
Well, it feels strange. That is actually a profound marker of success. It is a sign of deep glandular activation. The energetic heat is stimulating the endocrine system.
If your mouth floods of the saliva, the strict instruction is do not spit it out.
Right. The text views this fluid as highly refined internal medicine. To utilize it, you firmly tighten your neck muscles, press your chin down to your chest, and swallow the saliva with a hard, audible gulp, using actual physical force in the throat.
You want to mentally follow that fluid as it travels down your esophagus and lands in the fiery furnace of your navel. It is considered a cooling, nourishing fluid that regulates and balances the intense heat you have generated in the lower dantian.
We also need to touch on environmental factors. The texts are very strict about where and when you should avoid practicing.
Because you are actively opening your pores, stretching your fascia, and driving blood to the surface of the skin, your body becomes highly vulnerable to external climatic forces.
You must never practice these deep packing techniques outdoors if there is a strong cutting wind. You also avoid practicing in extremes of weather, bitter cold, oppressive heat, or deep soaking dampness.
In Chinese medicine, these environmental extremes are considered external pathogens. If your pores are wide open from the internal heat of the practice, a cold wind can drive that cold energy deep into the bone marrow, causing severe joint pain and illness.
Furthermore, on a purely practical level, you must never practice immediately after eating a heavy meal. Your body requires massive amounts of blood and energy to digest food. If you hijack that energy to pack your organs, you will entirely halt your digestion and create massive gastric distress.
Okay, so we have executed the morning routine. We swept the system, built the breath engine, sealed the floor, pumped the fluid, and armored the organs. Let's fast forward. The workday is over. The sun is beginning to set.
We are back in that liminal twilight zone where the active yang energy is receding and the cooling restorative yin energy is beginning to rise. How do we properly close out the biological day?
The evening routine is fundamentally different in its intent. The morning was entirely about generating heat, pressurization, and building structural armor to face the demands of the day.
The evening routine is about decompression. It is about gentle structural release to safely vent the physical tension and the emotional toxins you have absorbed. You absolutely do not want to practice the intense packing process or reverse breathing before bed.
Right, because if you do, your engine is going to be redlining. You will be bouncing off the walls at midnight.
Exactly. The text includes a very specific warning about this. It notes that while doing these intense practices right before sleep might technically improve your baseline metabolism, the massively enhanced blood circulation and the sheer volume of qi moving through the brain will violently excite your mind.
Your nervous system will interpret the high pressure as a signal to stay awake and alert, making it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to achieve deep restorative sleep. So the evening practice abandons pressure entirely and focuses on softness.
The evening protocol emphasizes very gentle joint opening exercises designed to release the mechanical stress of the day. One of the primary movements detailed is a specific neck roll.
You return to that relaxed standing Wuji posture. You let your hands rest softly over your belly to keep the energy centered low. Then, you simply allow the weight of your head to gently pull your chin down to your chest, naturally stretching the heavy muscles at the back of the neck.
Coordinating this movement with long, slow, deep yin breaths, you slowly roll the weight of your head up towards your right shoulder on the inhale. You exhale as you roll the chin back down across the chest, and then inhale as you roll up to the left shoulder.
This incredibly slow, rhythmic pendulum movement targets the cervical spine. As we discussed earlier, the C7 vertebra acts as the major structural junction for the entire upper body. By the end of a long day of working, driving, and interacting, C7s usually lock tight with immense physical and psychological tension.
This rolling movement physically unlocks the joint, unkinks the fascia, and allows the trapped heat to dissipate from the head.
This concept of trapped heat actually brings up a profound question I had while analyzing these sources. Throughout this deep dive, we have focused on breathing pure air to generate pure internal energy. But the text introduces a concept called post-heaven qi, which it alternatively refers to as fire qi.
Right. It states that this fire qi comes directly from the normal food we eat and the ambient air we breathe every day to survive.
But then it makes a startling claim. It explicitly warns that this post-heaven fire qi is a primary cause of emotional disturbance. Can you explain the biological mechanism here? Why would the simple act of digesting lunch and breathing city air cause emotional and psychological problems?
It is perhaps one of the most brilliant holistic observations made by the ancient physicians. They differentiate between two types of fuel. First is original qi, or pre-heaven qi. This is the pure, fundamental genetic life force you were born with. It is the baseline battery power inherited from your parents. It is clean, smooth, and perfect.
However, to survive in the world, you cannot just run on battery power. You must constantly take in fuel from the outside environment.
That external fuel, the food, the water, the oxygen, is called post-heaven qi. And the reality is, the outside world is chaotic. The external input is never perfectly clean. It contains chemical impurities, toxins, preservatives, pollution, and the chaotic, energetic imprint of a stressful environment.
So when the body takes in that impure fuel,
When your digestive system and your lungs work to break down and metabolize this impure, chaotic fuel, the biochemical friction of that process generates an immense amount of harsh, toxic heat. This is the fire chi.
in a healthy open body, that heat is vented. But if your internal organs are collapsed, if your diaphragm is tight, and if your meridians are blocked by physical tension, that toxic heat gets trapped inside the torso.
Heat naturally rises, so this harsh fire chi travels upward, it scorches the heart, and it floods the brain. Physically, this manifests as systemic inflammation, heartburn, and high blood pressure.
But psychologically, when that chaotic heat enters the nervous system, it manifests as mental agitation, severe anxiety, and inability to focus, and what the texts broadly call emotional disturbance. You literally feel the chaotic heat of your environment burning in your mind.
That perfectly bridges the gap between our physical digestion and our emotional state. It explains why a terrible diet or a highly polluted environment makes us feel anxious and irritable.
Precisely. And that is why the slow, deep yin abdominal breathing we start and end the day with is so vital.
The slow, rhythmic dropping of the diaphragm acts as a biological cooling system. It catches that rising, chaotic post-heaven fire, cools it down, refines it, and stores it safely in the lower abdomen as usable battery power, rather than letting it burn up into your mind and fry your nervous system.
That is absolutely brilliant. It reframes the entire purpose of taking a deep breath. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over. While reviewing these ancient manuals and cross-referencing them with modern biology, I found a piece of physiological math that completely shattered how I view my own life.
I know exactly the statistic you were thinking of. Go ahead.
The average human body takes roughly 13,500 breaths every single day. If you do the math on that, it breaks down to one breath every 6.4 seconds.
Think about that for a moment.
Every 6.4 seconds, 13,500 times a day, your diaphragm contracts. Your lungs fill with air, your heart physically adjusts its rhythm to match the pressure, the oxygen transfers into your blood, the carbon dioxide is expelled, and the cycle repeats.
It is the absolute continuous metronome of your existence.
And for the vast majority of our lives, we ignore almost every single one of those beats. We let the machine run entirely on autopilot, allowing stress, poor posture, and gravity to dictate the rhythm.
Exactly. But if you take what we have discussed today, if you take just a fraction of those 13,500 automatic daily breaths, perhaps just a few focused minutes during that morning twilight window, and you consciously, intentionally intervene.
If you make those breaths soft and slender, as the ancient texts suggest, if you consciously push the diaphragm down, if you physically seal the pelvic floor with an inner smile, and if you mechanically pump the fluid up your spine to build internal armor, you are no longer just doing a fitness routine.
You are hacking the core operating system of your biology.
You are fundamentally rewriting the continuous subconscious rhythm of your entire life. You are stepping into the driver's seat of a high-performance machine that usually drives itself into the ground.
It is the profound difference between simply surviving the friction of the day and actively, masterfully cultivating your own internal vitality.
Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us today. Remember to breathe deep, seal the leaks, protect your internal engine, and we'll see you next time.